Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. What I would like to do over the next 10 minutes is just explore this question. Why is it that we consume so much more than our parents did, than our grandparents did, all the time? Just one statistic to illustrate the position we've got ourselves into, the crazy position. The average supermarket in the UK holds no less than 40,000 different product lines. It takes 11 hours just to count to 40,000. So how did we end up in this crazy, crazy position? Two answers I would give to that question. First of all, we certainly didn't end up here by accident. There was very definitely a plan to get us to go down this route. Secondly, that we can resist this plan, we can roll back this plan, that we can do things differently. So whilst I will start in the dark, we will very definitely move into the light and look to a hopeful future. But first of all, the plan. If we go back 120 years or so, two convulsions changed very profoundly the way we live our lives. First of all, we came up with the ideas of mass production. So suddenly there's a way of making an enormous quantity of consumer goods, far more than had ever been before. At the same time, the market, which heretofore had been made up of lots of little businesses, became consolidated into a much smaller number of big operators. The modern business corporation was born. And these new corporations, they became known as robber barons indeed, were extremely powerful and extremely wealthy. But they were also nervous. The threat that they could see is that the mass production techniques that were producing lots and lots of stuff ran the risk of all this stuff being in greater supply than were the demands of the market. And if supply outstrips demand, then it becomes a buyer's market. That reduces their margins, their profits, and their power. Their savior took the form of a man called Edward Bernays, who wrote a book in 1928 called simply Propaganda. And for Bernays, advertising was the new propaganda, and it could get us trolling along to the shops happily and readily. As a later commentator pointed out, the function of this advertising was that of waging a war on behalf of producers and sellers of consumer goods, a relentless war against saving and in favour of consumption. Before we go any further, it's worth pausing for a moment and remembering that word propaganda. Propaganda does not tell the truth, nor does advertising. Advertisers sell us Coca-Cola, but don't tell us about the diabetes. They sell us the pleasure of stuff, but not the cost and corrosion of materialism. They lie to us continuously and continually. And as Hannah Arendt, the philosopher, pointed out, this has really serious repercussions. When everyone lies all the time, the result is not that you believe the lies, but that nobody believes anything anymore. And people who can't believe can't form opinions. They are deprived not just of their ability to act, but also their ability to think and make judgments. With such people, you can do whatever you want. The lies of the advertisers were soon joined by a more complex and sophisticated discipline, marketing, which is neatly defined as making what you can sell, not selling what you can make, and sounds on the surface like quite a good idea. The problem with it is it's created a system where marketers study us incredibly well. They want to know not just our needs, but our wants and our whims. They find out our vulnerabilities. They find out how best to sell us more stuff. And with this insight, they can apply a whole variety of tools, not just advertising and propaganda, but product design, packaging, point of sale, pricing, everything, every time of the day and night. The growth in this marketing industry was absolutely stratospheric. By the turn of the millennium, it employed some 30 million people and drove consumer spending worth $5 trillion a year. Since then, digital technology has come into its force, and we have entered what Shoshone Zuboff calls the age of surveillance capitalism, where the corporate marketers know more about us than our own mothers did, and they can sell us anything, anywhere, anytime. But we aren't the only ones who are in their crosshairs. Two other key groups are also very much targeted by the corporate marketer. Firstly, children. It's crucial that future generations, coming generations, take on this same role of hyperconsumption. They're important, as this business textbook says, in their own right. They have money of their own. They influence their parents' selection of products and brands. And most chillingly, they will grow up to be the consumers of everything. The second group that are also very much of interest to the marketers is politicians, because they set the rules of the market, the regulatory frameworks and so on. They too are pulled on side, as John Dewey remarked more 100 years ago now. Politics in general is an echo, except when it is an accomplice of the interests of big business. It is the shadow cast on society by big business. So it's little surprise then that we have turned into hyper-consumers. So much effort and time and skill has been focused on making us do so. But all is not lost. As Seamus Heaney expressed it, there is hope. History says don't hope on this side of the grave, but then once in a lifetime, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. We are at just such a juncture now, as our impact of our consumption behavior on the climate and on the planet is becoming so obvious. It is clearly a moment of reflection and rethinking. And we are more than capable of doing this. We are human beings, not mere consumers, intrinsically capable of greatness. We are Mahatma Gandhis and Rosa Parks, not Zuckerbergs and Bezos, let alone their playthings. We have moral agency. We can imagine better. We can do better. And as Rowan Williams says, even as we begin this process, so we could bring great benefits. We can, as he says, escape the toxicity of the mindset that brought us to this pass. No small thing in an era when people are getting very stressed by what is happening to the natural world. But we can also go one step further. We can do better still. And here for me, fair trade is an important beacon. It does great good in its own right. People benefit from it here and now. But it's also a great symbol of human potential, how that we can do better, we can look after each other, we are capable of mutual benefit. And indeed, it reminds us that marketing itself is not something invented by the corporate sector. It's as old as human society. We've always done business. And as long as the participants in the business process have an equal amount of power, so it works really well. The problems happen when massive power intervenes, as it does with the major corporations of today. So we can do better. And the indigenous wisdom, the people of the wisdom of indigenous people, remind us how true this is. This is Thomas Jefferson writing in 1787. At this point in history, only part of the United States had been conquered. He looked across the country and said, I am convinced that those Indian societies which live without government enjoy in their general mass an infinitely greater degree of happiness than those who live under European governments. There are alternatives, and they are alternatives that produce happiness and contentment. Ours is an economic system built on acquisition, extraction, and perpetual growth. We have been forced, encouraged, trained to be complicit in this activity. Indigenous wisdom shows that there are alternatives. We can do better. Let me finish with the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson. So a thought and you reap an action. So an act and you reap a habit. So a habit and you reap a character. So a character and you reap a destiny. It is time for a new sowing, and we are more than capable gardeners. Thank you for listening.